about September the 11th. September the 11th, 2001, a day that will certainly live in the history books. And you could say a date that very much like D-Day, a day that will live in infamy. Right? Not D-Day, the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, was a day that will live in infamy as well. And so was September the 11th, which was the biggest attack on American soil by a foreign agent since Pearl Harbor. And I remember saying on September the 11th, on 9/11/2001, I remember saying a few things. One, as I watched the towers come down, I said, this is basically, Osama did this. This is Al-Qaeda. This is Osama's work, which I knew for various reasons because I was deeply involved in relevant work at the time that informed me about that. So I knew, and I had informed the American government at the highest levels in the late 1990s that it was likely that we would see another attack on the World Trade Center and places like the Pentagon because they're critical position in terms of the critical infrastructure of the United States. And lo and behold, I was right, unfortunately. I remember saying Osama did this, Al-Qaeda did this, before anybody had said it was them. I remember saying it and writing it online to friends and family. Speaking with a uncle of mine who called me up and said, have you seen this thing in New York? I looked at the TV and I said, yeah, this is absolutely Osama. And then I saw the second plane hit. I said, yeah, absolutely. This is definitely Al-Qaeda. And unfortunately, I was right. Now, I'm not saying I was the only person in the world that said that, but I was definitely saying that from the very beginning because it was kind of obvious to anybody who studied this information and was aware of these things. And it's now been 23 years since those attacks. Awful, awful time in American history. And, I'm not going to go through all of the horrible things that happened to people that I knew or to all of the amazing people that were lost in New York and in Pennsylvania and in Washington, D.C., technically in Virginia, because that's where the Pentagon is. But I will say that my predictions about how this thing would go have been spot on. First of all, Al-Qaeda would pay a price. Osama would pay a price for doing what he did. He ended up losing his life over it because of two things. One, he attacked the biggest military and the most powerful military in the world. And two, he attacked the people who would pay for them to go after him. So there was no chance that they could, quote unquote, kinetically win the war. Now, what I also said was that depending on how they carry out this war against these terrorists will determine the ultimate outcome of how the world looks in the future after such a horrendous attack that should not be accepted or tolerated by anyone anywhere. Unfortunately, since then, we've seen the attacks by Al-Qaeda in many places. Right before Osama was killed, there was the attack in Madrid, there was the attack in London, there have been attacks all over the world that Al-Qaeda launched, and then the ISIS group, which is a splinter of them or a derivative of theirs, in Iraq and in Syria, that for many years oppressed Kurds, and Yazidis, and all kinds of people that they oppressed, and it took an international coalition of forces to fight them back and contain them, but they still exist. Hey, you're from India. Hello, India. Love you, India. And we've seen in Israel on October 7th an attack that was, if you calculate the proportion of the population, right, the size of the population of the United States and the number of people in the United States that were affected versus the size of the population in Israel and the number of people that were directly affected, Israel basically suffered like 44 9/11s in a single day, right? because Israel's tiny. It's the size of New Jersey, and the population is like, not even 10 million people. So for 1,200 people to be murdered and hundreds more to be captured as hostages in a single day, it's like 20 or 40 9/11s on a single day. Okay. Where am I from? I am from Spaceship Earth, flying through space. I'm from many places, actually. I've lived in many places. I live on Earth like everyone else. Walter Jr. asks, am I gay? No. But okay. I don't see what that has to do with anything, with remembering 9/11. Why even ask that? But okay. Okay. I don't know what those emojis are, but okay. Hello, happy emojis. Happy face emojis. So 9/11 changed the face of the world in politics and how people fight against terrorism. However, 9/11 led to a situation where the quagmire politics did not carry out the war on terror as it should have been, and thus allowed for a non-decisive victory kinetically, even though America and the coalition of forces in Afghanistan definitely kinetically won. But then when Trump said, okay, we're going to leave now, and then Biden carried out the leaving, right? The two presidents, the 45 and the 46th president of the United States, decided to leave Afghanistan and basically left it in the hands of the Taliban. They ended up losing kinetically, in a sense, because the Taliban have control of Afghanistan now, because the United States did not leave Afghanistan in a situation where the Afghan government could stay in power. Hey, bro, I'm from Israel. All right, bro. Love Israel. Let's go, Israel. Shalom. And Israel faces similar problems facing the terrorists, right? The same kind of fundamentalist extremists that carried out 9/11. Israel faces, Hamas. Israel faces Hezbollah. These are Islamofascists who want to destroy a free, democratic, liberal, progressive country, which respects human rights and which gives people the right to vote and which recognizes all kinds of people and, allows people who are straight to get married and has all these wonderful, positive cultural freedoms and political freedoms for people, and freedom of expression and freedom of religion and freedom of whatever. You don't have to be Jewish to live in Israel. You don't have to be Jewish to be Israeli, right? 1 in 5 Israelis is Arab, Muslim. 1 in 10 or 1 in 20, something like that, whatever the number is, 5% or maybe it's 1%. Some small percent of people in Israel are also Christian, right? After all, Israel is the birthplace of Judaism and of Christianity. And obviously it's important to Islam. How many times is Jerusalem mentioned in the Quran? 44 times. How many times is Jerusalem mentioned, is Palestine mentioned in the Quran? 0 times. Because there wasn't a Palestine. There's never been a Palestine, right? But the Prophet Muhammad, who wrote the Quran, or who's credited as writing it, recognized that he had to convince people in Saudi Arabia, where he was living, to become Muslim when he was starting his religion. And the bulk of the people he tried to convert first were actually Jews in the city of Medina, which is why he made Jerusalem so important in the Quran, so that Jews would relate to that and say, oh, okay, you think Jerusalem is important, we think Jerusalem is important. And he wrote in the Quran that, Jerusalem and Israel, the land of Israel, the land of, Abraham, was the home of the Jews and forever would be, and that Jews should live there. But then, when a bunch of Jews said, hey, we actually don't want to convert to your religion, he got upset. And so he turned to Mecca and made Mecca the center of the Islamic world in his worldview, and made that the place where What you saying? If you come a bit more close, you will be inside the phone. Yes, I want to reach in the phone to be there with you. Too close. Okay, what do you want me to do? You want me to pull the phone away? Why does that make a difference? Don't my words sound differently if I'm further from the phone? I like having the phone like this. I don't see why that's a problem. I'm talking about things. It doesn't matter. Put something else there if you want. Put that. Is that better? So 9/11, right? All ties back to Islamic extremism wanting to take over the world. The same Islam that Muhammad created has been twisted and warped. And granted, that guy had his own huge flaws, enormous flaws, like how he treated people and what he did to certain people, including a very, very young child bride he had, which is disgusting in every way imaginable. Just the war. Means mental. What means mental? I don't know what means mental. Who's William Prasad? I don't know who William Prasad is. Your country, India, only invented zero. I don't know what that means. India has invented many wonderful things. India is awesome in many ways. This is like the kissing a guy. Sure, you're not. What? Guys, I'm talking about 9/11, right? Remembering 9/11. It was an absolutely horrendous day in American history. More and it could have is basically because of politics, right? And the fact that the groups fighting against the West are driven by ideology. They take their orders from God, quote unquote. They don't care if they live or die, supposedly, although the leaders clearly do. What they care about is their ideology, which is to bring about the end of the world. That's their ideology. They want to bring about the end of the world. Will they succeed in doing that? Hopefully not. For those of us who like to live, hopefully that will not be the case. They will not bring around the end of the world through horrible violence. But that is their aim. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about that. It's very uncomfortable. But to me, it's very normal to talk about uncomfortable things, especially when it comes to security and peace and prosperity. Right? We need to live in a world where people value life more than they value death, because death happens. Life is exceptionally rare in the universe, but everything that lives eventually dies. So death happens to everything that lives so far that we've known. And life is pretty rare in the universe that we know of. Pretty much it happens on Earth. Arguably, you could say, yes, there's been bacteria found on other planets or moons or whatever. Or there's evidence of them, not living bacteria, but we've seen evidence that there have been bacteria or living things, water on other planets. So therefore, there must have been life there, or there could have been life there. Yes, but it's still very rare in terms of what we actually know of. Does that mean that the universe is not teeming with life in other places that we just don't know of? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means we have not yet found it. So life is precious, at least here on Earth at this time. And it should always be precious, because if you're alive, you should value your own life more than you value dying. Because once you die, it's over. Maybe you believe in heaven or an afterlife or whatever, but the life you are living is over when you die. It doesn't matter if there's an afterlife or not. It matters that the life you live now, when it ends, is over. So you should do everything you can to make this life the best you can for yourself and for those around you, if you can. And why? Because we're social creatures. So when we help others, in theory, we increase the probability of others helping us when we need it. That's what being a social creature means. That's why the social contract between humans, right? Not a written contract that you sign, but the social agreement, the bond between people, from everything from the time there were just groups of people living together in caves, to then there were, small tribes or villages, to then there were, cities and city states, to eventually countries, and to eventually international groups and federal, federated systems, why do we have these social contracts with people? Because the more we help others, the more we can expect help back from them when we need it. Well, the people who carried out 9/11 don't want that social contract. They want everyone to submit to their awful, violent, oppressive ways, and anyone who doesn't gets the pleasure of dying quicker or dying sooner, not quicker necessarily. They might just torture them and make it last as long as possible and do horrible things to them along the way, and then show a video of it to scare other people into submission. And they want to oppress everybody and make everybody follow their insane views of the world. And then they want everybody to die. And whoever doesn't follow their views, they want to kill them. And that's what we're talking about. That's why 9/11 happened. Right? Oh, it was an inside job. No, it wasn't an inside job. Okay? And no. It was very well known that Al-Qaeda had planned this out. There's strong. Hello, sir. From hey, New Zealand. How are you? No, people don't help me. Yeah. Listen, Light Free. I completely agree with you that not everybody lives up to the social contract. I'm just saying the general idea and the reason that people are social creatures, by and large, not everybody, or even those that are who don't always get help. But the general idea is that those who do help others generally can expect more help back when they need it. And I agree completely that that's not always the case. Completely. Believe me, that's happened to me a lot. But there is a reason that people behave socially in the way that they do usually, which is not to attack every single person that's living around you, but to try to get along with people. Because you are a great ape. We are all great apes, right? Or we're all humans, you can at least say, if you don't believe in evolution, which is, I don't even know what to tell you, but feel free to not believe in the evolution. But whether you believe in evolution or not, we are all at least humans, and humans are social creatures. That's demonstrable, right? We don't all live individually from each other. We live in countries. Countries are formed by, or most of us live in countries, or we live in places that are ruled by certain people, and those certain people make laws, and those laws are followed by the majority of people who live within those regions. Yeah. So again, 9/11, a day that will live in infamy, just like Pearl Harbor Day, was an absolutely horrendous day. And the outcome of it was the Western powers that had the ability to stop terror from spreading even more than it did failed to do so, because starting with President George W. Bush, as much as he wanted to bring justice to the bad guys, he failed to do so because of politics. And he did not prosecute the war the way he should have, to the extent that it needed to be, to actually end the bloodthirsty dreams of the Islamofascists who want to take over the world and oppress women and oppress gays and oppress everybody who's not an Islamofascist. You can even be a Muslim. If you don't believe in their version of Islam, you're a whatever, apostate. You're a sinner. You deserve to be treated like a second-class citizen or die. You've just been watching 9/11 2 days straight now. Wow, incredibly sad for the innocent lives. Yeah, absolutely. It was a horrendous time. I remember that day like it was today. It will never escape me. And it was absolutely terrible. I lost a lot of friends that day, and a lot of colleagues, and many friends and relatives were directly impacted by that. And it was a horrendous time. Unfortunately, the West has done an incredibly poor job in winning that war and making the world a better place by getting rid of the Islamofascists that launched that war. All religions were created. Okay? Hey, what's your name? Milka. That's a long name, but I hope I don't mess it up. Milaka Inz Maori. Or are you Maori? It's just the name, but anyway, cool. All religions were created by separate and divided or divided the people. We don't need religions because our lives are based of nature, not religious beliefs. Hey, listen, everybody's free to their own religious belief. I'm not going to criticize anybody for having religious beliefs. And I certainly don't see a need to follow one or the other. And, necessarily, like if you're born in, if you're a Maori and you grew up in a place that never heard of some religion across the world, what would make you think that that religion across the world is the right one? Or if you're born in some religion on the other side of the planet and you never heard of Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism, why would you believe in those things if you never even heard about them? It's a bit arrogant for anybody to say, oh, everybody should follow this one idea. No, like religions are generally guides for life, right? It's like it's like a set of rules to live by. Many of them were invented before common laws were invented or before they were adopted by society at large. Many of them were the laws, right? Judaism, the laws of the Torah, those are the laws when they were created in the Jewish culture in Israel at the time. Those were the laws. So it wasn't so much a religion, quote unquote, as just that's what you were. If you were Jewish, if you lived in Judah, or if you lived in Judea, you followed those laws. If you were living in Israel, you followed those laws because that's the laws that were, quote unquote, on the books. Literally, the 10 books, the 5 books of Moses, right? The Torah. So those were the laws. So people live under laws now. It's just that as Judaism has evolved, has changed over time, and it is a religion that changes and adapts to new things, right? That's what the Talmud and the Mishnah are. As Judaism has evolved and has become a religion more than just literally a set of laws people live under, Israel is not governed by the Torah, by law, right? Anybody can whatever religion they want in Israel. But the Jewish religion is the most popular religion in Israel for obvious reasons, because it's a majority Jewish country. So culturally speaking, the rules or the Torah is very significant in Israel. So this Jewish holidays are national holidays. Not every single Jewish holiday is a national holiday in Israel, but a lot of them are. But there are lots of Jewish holidays that practically nobody observes except ultra Orthodox people who happen to know about them. Most secular Jews or even slightly traditional or conservative Jews, they don't even know about a lot of the holidays that the ultra Orthodox celebrate, right? And where am I from? I am from Earth. Again, I am from planet Earth. I've lived in many places, but I'm from Earth. Yeah, coffee. It's good to have a good coffee once in a while. Where I'm from is irrelevant, right? I'm just sharing my opinions about things. I can debunk all religions. How simple? We all human cures. Okay, this is again from Milakai NZ Maori. I can debunk all religions. How simple? We all human cures come from nature. When we heal, we go to the mountains or woods. Nature, the evidence proves our lives are based on nature. Nature shows the way. Okay, we don't all. I don't know what you mean by we when we heal, we go to the mountains or woods. No, not everybody goes to the mountains or the woods to heal. I mean, maybe you do. Congratulations, that's awesome. That sounds great. But whether we come from nature or not is not a reason to believe or not believe in a particular religion. Plenty of people who believe in evolution believe in religion. Plenty of people who don't believe in evolution are not religious. They have nothing to do with each other. These are completely different ideas. Okay. This isn't about religion per se. This is about remembering 9/11 and remembering the awful things that happened because of people who twisted and perverted a religion, Islam, into a fundamentalist extremist view of it. This is not an indictment of most Muslims. That's not the purpose of this video. I do not dislike Islamic people just because they're Islamic people. That would be insane. That would be hateful. I am not those things. Okay. I've served in armies next to people who are Muslim, and next to people who are Jewish, and next to people who are Christian. Right? And we all protected each other. It would be insane of me to hate somebody because of their religious beliefs. That's exactly the kind of extremism that led to 9/11. And I'm very much against that. I think the idea of doing anything like what happened on 9/11 is absolutely horrendous, and people should stop doing those kind of things. But unfortunately, there's a growing number of those kind of things over time because of one is political freedom or the lack thereof. Pause for a minute, right? You could say, well, the terrorists of 9/11 were mostly middle-class people or well-to-do people, all poor, and that's not why they attacked. Right. They were specifically chosen for a mission for a reason, and their profiles were vetted extremely carefully by Osama and his henchmen, and there was a reason that they chose those specific people. But if you're going to tell me being incredibly impoverished has nothing to do with why people are willing to do certain things, you don't understand how this operates, right? The people that pick, for example, suicide bombers, they know exactly what they're doing. They're picking desperate people, vulnerable people who are easy to influence and to convince that, hey, your life is already garbage. Why don't you just strap this thing on? And when you go to heaven, after you do your terrible thing, after you push that button and kill a bunch of Jews or kill a bunch of whatevers, kill a bunch of Muslims, right? Then you'll go to heaven and you get your 72 virgins, and we'll make sure that your family has a bunch of money and that they'll keep getting paid forever, and you will be remembered as a martyr, and they will sing praises to you, and we'll make a parade for you once, when we bury you, and we'll put posters of you in the town, and you'll be famous forever, which is more than you'll ever accomplish in this life. And they get them all doped up. This happens quite frequently, and they usually keep them isolated to brainwash them, and it takes anywhere from 48 to 96 hours to get somebody to be convinced to do something horrendous like that. How do I know? Because there's a lot of studies that have been done on this based on the number of people who attempted to do this and failed and got captured and have been interviewed, right? And went through the process of being debriefed by Israeli intelligence, by Israeli security, by Israeli prison staff. They've been interviewed by reporters. Mila, about a worship gene in the DNA. Do you have any evidence of that? I don't know about anything like that. There is, I know that there are people who say that there's something called the God gene. Or what is it? On Google, I just looked it up. The vesicular monoamine transporter 2, or VMAT2, predisposes humans towards spiritual or mystic experiences. Yeah, there is that. It's a theory, or it's a hypothesis anyway. Are we predisposed as human beings to want to believe in a higher power? It could very well be that a lot of people are. Not everybody is. And I think the more time passes, the pop grows, and you'll continue to see more people who are predisposed to believe in religion and more people who are not predisposed to believe in it. There will always be a balance. Religion says, worship me, not yourself or your family. Right. Yes, Malika, I agree. Look, you're preaching to the choir, man. I'm not here preaching religion to people, man. I'm not here preaching, but I'm also not trashing people who are religious. I'm not. Like, I got plenty of wonderful people in my life who are very religious, some more than others. They're good people. I don't have any problem with them. They have good values, right? They care about life. They care about other people. So it's not like all religious people are terrible people. It's just not true. Right? In fact, I would argue the vast majority of people who are religious are good people. There's plenty of evidence for that. But there are certainly plenty of terrible things that have happened in every religion. And there are certainly people who are influencers or leaders of religions who have done plenty of terrible things in basically every religion. And many of those people have exploited or abused their religions. And, you know, most great civilizations go through a period of birth, growth, development, enlightenment, but many times they have a dark age too, right? Christianity certainly had a big dark age. It was called the Dark Age, right? The Dark Ages, the medieval ages and the Dark Ages. Those were pretty bad times in Christian history. But eventually they had an enlightenment and they came out of it much better. They care more about humanity. Are they perfect? No. Did they even do terrible things after the Renaissance? You bet. There was still slavery under Christian rules until the British started taking that apart, right? It was the British who began freeing the slaves, and then the French, and then the Americans, and everybody else. But it was the British who began saying, no, slavery is bad. We got to end this. And they were very religious then. Israel has certainly, the land of Israel, ancient Israel, has had dark periods of time in its history, very dark periods, right? Islam is going through a dark age right now. It's very clear. Islam had a golden age too, where they invented algebra. They invented a lot of things to do with astronomy. They discovered a lot of things to do with science and medicine. They had an amazing cultural contribution to the planet and to humanity. But now in the last few hundred years, or at least the last 150 years, 200 years, they've been going through a dark age. And at some point, hopefully, it will end. And they will enter their own age of enlightenment and renaissance and whatever. Hopefully sooner rather than later, because at the rate things are going, if they do obtain a nuclear bomb and some theocratic nut job is at the helm and wants to end the world and start a nuclear war that could do that, you know, that's a real risk. Now, look, Turkey hosts American bases with nuclear bombs on them, nuclear missiles, ICBMs, that NATO approved of, right? Which is why the United States put them in Turkey, because Turkey is a member of NATO. And they were put there because at the time, America and Russia were in a Cold War. And so one of the things America did was put nuclear bombs in Turkey in case Russia were ever to try to launch or threaten to launch. So there are American NATO bases in Turkey, because Turkey's a member of NATO still, even though they've done so many things against NATO's interests in recent years. And Turkey has American, made hardware, military hardware, F-16s and tanks and armored personnel carriers, and you name it. They're an American-equipped army, and they are strong. They're not a piece of paper, right? And they've helped ISIS fight against Syria. ISIS, the terrorists. They helped them fight against the government of Syria. I'm not a fan of the government of Syria. The guy's a dictator, Bashar Assad. Right? Bashar al-Assad is a dictator just like his dad, Hafez al-Assad was. But I'm not a fan of the terrorist groups that attack him either. They're both quite terrible. They oppress the people of Syria quite terribly. And they brainwash them into thinking that all their problems are the Jews. Why? Because it's the scapegoat. You point fingers at the scapegoat. Just like in 9/11, Al-Qaeda pointed fingers at the Jews and the Americans, because Al-Qaeda said, we're coming for Israel, and then we're coming for America. But first, we're going to set off fireworks in America because it's an easier, big target. But ultimately, they want to take down America. Why do they want to take down America? Why do they want to take down Israel? Because Israel and America represent liberal, progressive democracy. They represent equal rights for all. They represent economic freedom. They represent capitalism. They represent women's rights, LGBTQ rights, all these rights. They represent anti-slavery. And by the way, Western Europe also represents all these things. Why do you think so many Muslims have been migrating to Europe? Because they want to escape the hellholes they've been growing up in. But many of them go there with the ideal of, no, we want to infiltrate Europe, and we want to make Europe more like our Islamic countries that we came from. Obviously not the majority of Muslims who go to Europe have that idea, but a significant portion of them do. How significant? Significant enough that it has become a real problem in many European countries where there are 10, 20, 30, 40% Muslims now. And I'm not saying they should kick out all the Muslims. That's insane. But I am saying that Europe has been too lax in allowing people to come into its country who want to destroy their country. It's okay to be tolerant of people. It's in fact important to be tolerant of people in other cultures. But if you're intolerant, if you are tolerant of intolerance, you're killing yourself. If you are tolerant of people who want to kill you, you're killing yourself. And that's what Europe is doing. And that's why we saw the attacks of 7/7. We saw the attacks, in Madrid, in London, in all over European countries. We've seen these attacks happen at the hands of Al-Qaeda and other Islamofascists since 9/11. Because precisely those Europeans which did not have a significant Muslim population during the last 100 years suddenly did in the last 40 years, 30 years. Because they said, okay, we're guilty for all the bad things that ever happened. Therefore, we must allow intolerant people to take over our country. Basically, that's what political correctness caused. How did that happen? You can blame socialism, but it's not the only cause. It's really not the only cause. You can blame liberalism, but it's not the only cause. It's a reaction. What is socialism? What is liberalism? It's a reaction to fascism. Or you could say fascism is a reaction to liberalism and socialism. Right? It's an imbalance in the system. And part of that imbalance in the system is due to economic power. Who controls the wealth? And it's not some cabal of one religion or another, or one ethnic group or another, especially if that includes divide and conquer. The wealthy are wealthy. That's the club they're in. If you ain't wealthy, you ain't in the club. It's that simple. And they don't care what religion you are. They just want the money. Show me the money. It's about the money, Lebowski. It's the money, Lebowski. Right? So, 9/11. Remember the souls if you want. I do. Remember the terrible things that happened on that day. I do. The people, the heroes that went into the fire to try to rescue others. And many of those first responders and random people who ran into that hell gave their lives to try to rescue others. And many people they saved, and then they would perish. That happened time and time again on 9/11. There are countless stories practically. I mean, so many stories of people who went into the hell to get others out and then perished themselves. Those were heroes. They were extremely brave. And they were people who understood what self-sacrifice is for the greater good. They were willing to give up their lives to try to save other people's lives. Firefighters, policemen, civilians, paramedics. There were no shortage of people who ran into the hell that was happening in the Twin Towers or the Pentagon to try to save people. And the shame But what happened is that the war against terror was not prosecuted correctly, and therefore the crazy Islamofascism that existed then has festered into a bigger and worse problem. And yes, you could say, well, ISIS has been contained and the Taliban off to the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans so that they can reverse engineer it. Terrific. And are you going to blame one president or the other? I'm not. They're both screwed up. Trump screwed up by agreeing to negotiate with the Taliban in the first place about that whole thing and inviting them to Camp David. And then Joe Biden screwed up by carrying out that insane plan. They both screwed up. Don't tell me one's better than the other. They're not. They're the same. They're political people. They're politicians. Left wing, right wing, same bird. If you want an actual change in the way politics is done, you need to change how politics is done. Having politics be owned by donor owners, basically big corporate industrialists, massively wealthy people who can afford to give hundreds of millions of dollars in donations to politicians. Well, until that changes, what do you expect politicians to do? That's what they're going to do. They're going to serve the people that pay them. Why does Trump suddenly like Elon Musk when he didn't like him for so many years? He liked him, but not so much, and he would criticize him a lot. Now he criticizes him a lot less, and he says it openly. The guy gives me a lot of money for my campaign. Therefore, I got to be nice to him. He says it openly. Biden does the same thing. You think Biden doesn't serve corporate donor owners? He absolutely does. He might not say it as publicly, but doesn't mean he's not doing it. They all do it. They're all owned by corporate interests, by massive corporate titans who want to own the political system for their own greed and interests. So that's what I have to say about that. Remember 9/11 and the heroes that perished that day and the victims that perished that day. And let's hope for a better world and a better future. And yeah, I guess that's going to be it for now. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.